I do now want to jump into the mental health stuff, whether it's PTSD, TBI, whatever it might be. I know that's super, super important to you. And before we kind of go down the line of psychedelics and how you feel about that stuff, have you ever heard the term operator syndrome?
Yeah, of course. I mean, Morgan Luttrell and Dr. Chris Fry, they published a study in, it was right around 2010, I want to say. Don't quote me on that. But it highlighted that, most of us didn't have quote unquote traditional PTSD, even though we had all the symptoms, depression, anxiety, the outbursts, lack of sleep, the, dysregulation of our hormones and on and on and on. But a lot of that was stemming from, subconcussive blows to the head, the stuff you and I were talking about earlier, all this, breaching and years of football and whatever you want to call it, where it's not like the big boom, where you blow up and you wake up a couple minutes later and you were out, or you got hit in football and you wake up 2 minutes later, but it's like the constant repetition of subconcussive blows over the years. And they're actually, they have a chart now, especially in football. It's not about the single impact. It's how many years you were in and the number of impacts that you've had. And so it really is a number of times that your head's getting hit. And then like everything else, take that and go back to the individual. There are some that can take thousands of blows and probably be okay. And there's others that can take, let's say less than 100 and not be okay. Right. And so, it's all individualized, but operator syndrome is a real thing. And, I think, we're learning more and more that the depression, the anxiety, the sleeplessness, the anger is stemming from, mild traumatic brain injury.
And that was a great way to explain it, because I'm sure most people watching this have never heard that term before, but it seems so relevant in this mental health discussion, not just that we're having, but with a lot of tier one guys that I've seen have the exact same discussion. So for you personally, when you get out, you have some struggles. What were those struggles? And then how did you discover psychedelics as a tool to fix that?
Yeah, well, it was actually started three years before I got out, where I was prescribed my first antidepressant because I was really I was not having a good time. I was isolating and I was having some real anxiety attacks, some like real stressful moments for no reason. And I was put on those from 2010 to 2017, so 7 years straight of prescription medication. No opioids. I didn't have surgeries, but, I was still on something that caused kind of like a numbing, kind of just numbed you out to things. So really had no feeling. And also had a lot of side effects. So like sexual side effects, weight gain, suicidality. I mean, they're giving prescription medications to individuals that already have potentially tendency or a suicidal ideation, medications that cause greater suicidal ideation, right? Like it's just the formula is all wrong. We obviously shouldn't be doing this. And so I was on this train of prescription medications, talk therapy, and then I wasn't getting better, David, and so I started looking into alternative therapy. So TMS, these magnets, transcranial magnetic stimulation, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, that didn't have, still doesn't have a whole lot of like evidence-based, science-backed data behind it, but individuals supposedly were getting better. And so I tried all these things and I really wasn't getting better. I was really getting worse, and lucky for me, my wife, Amber, who, had been with me, now we're almost going on 27 years, just said, we're going to figure this out. And she started working with a doctor who had sent his best friend to a psychedelic retreat. He was in the same kind of dealing with the same thing I was. He had over 20 combat deployments. It was 30 years in special operations, and nothing was working for this individual. The only thing that did work was psychedelic treatment and with proper integration with a therapist afterwards. And I was experiencing the same exact things this person was, and so they thought, well, what the heck? If it worked for him, it can work for me, maybe. And so I committed. I felt like I had nothing to lose at that time. I tried everything that traditional medicine had offered me. And for me, within 3 days, I was like a new person, completely changed my life. It, saved my life. It saved my family. And the only thing I wanted to do was pay it forward. And it's the first thing I said to Amber when I saw her was, this is exactly what the guys need. And actually I got pissed off because I said, I can't believe that we haven't heard about this. Like, why am I just hearing about this now? I know friends that I served with have been struggling for years, had friends that have taken their own lives, and we're just hearing about something that is so life altering, and healing. And so, my first reaction was pay it forward. My next reaction was just anger that we just didn't know about this. And so, Amber and I just started a grassroots effort to try to get our friends the same treatment. Somebody paid for me because these treatments are expensive. And so that's what we had to do. We had to go find money to pay these retreats to bring other people who were struggling. And that's what we did. And so, we got lucky. Someone wrote us a $25,000 check. We were able to fund, I think, 5 individuals, and then of course that leads to their 2 or 3 friends that need help. And now we got 15 individuals that are reaching out. And so in 2019, we filed officially for our 501c3, which is nonprofit status, which basically says that we could raise funds. They can be tax deductible to individuals that are giving us money. And then we can pay for, these individuals to go get treated. And that's what we did. And from 2019, the organization's called VETS, Veterans Exploring Treatment Solutions. We're closing in on right about 1,000 special operations veterans now that we have funded for the same type of treatment that I did. And, of course, the program has grown immensely. We have several pillars of focus. We're doing research. A new study just came out with Stanford. I think it was January 5th in Nature magazine. We're doing research with Ohio State. We're putting together something right now with Columbia. We're working on federal and state initiatives to open up access right here in the U.S., open up funding. So there's a lot of things happening just off of, my initial treatment in 2017. And really, it's geared towards, what we're working on the nonprofit side, which is veterans. And at the same time, I'm working to establish access and affordability for the rest of America to be able to have access to these treatments at the same time. So
this is what fascinates me about psychedelics. I will admit, I don't know anything about them, haven't done them. I understand the concept of how they work, but I know maybe a lot of older people, they might hear psychedelics and they think, well, isn't that something hippies and surf bums take? What's the point of that? Do we want a bunch of druggies running around? I obviously don't feel that way, which is why we're having this conversation right now. But what would you say to someone who thinks that we're going to give these guys psychedelics? Why are we doing that? Just give them pills, send them to the VA. Like, what would you say to someone like that?
Well, they're giving us pills anyway. So we got, literally hundreds of thousands of not just veterans, I'd say millions of Americans on drugs, literally on drugs. But just because, a doctor said that we can take these drugs, most people think, well, that's okay. And I can live with that. You got to think of psychedelics the same way. All they are is another drug. They're just another medicine to use. They are a powerful medicine. They are not like the others. They're a different class, but they're a class that heals the individual much, much quicker than traditional, modern access we have to modern medicine can do. Psychedelics got, I wish there was another name for it, but psychedelics just got a bad name in the 60s for, being part of the counterculture. But they were initially intended and they were developed for mental health. So they were developed for mental health, that literally thousands and thousands of papers for their use and for their efficacy on like all mental health issues, depression, anxiety, substance use disorder, and on and on. They got taken and abused by counterculture, and then they got stopped. The research stopped in 1970, and we've just picked up the research again in right around 1990 or 91. Johns Hopkins started researching them again, only because the research was already there. I mean, they just picked up where they left off. And so now we're talking about there's over 250 clinical trials going on around the world, doing the same exact thing they did in the 30s and 40s and 50s. And so we kind of missed out on 50 years of knowledge. But we have to look at these not as countercultural recreational drugs. We have to look at them as these are medicines that are going to allow people to heal really quickly and get to the root cause of issues. And can they be abused as recreational drugs? Absolutely. Just like every other drug can. So they got to look at it as it's a drug utilized for mental health that gets to the root cause of issues much better than anything we have accessible right now, that yes, can be abused as recreational drugs, just like everything else can.
Is it still psychedelics are still federally legal, right?
Most of them are called, they're Schedule 1. The FDA or the DEA schedules them, meaning that there's no medical use and they have a high rate of abuse. We know that the no medical use is incorrect. We know that there's a strong medical case for them. Can they be abused? Yes, they can be abused, but if you control them correctly, we regulate it, clinically guided access in a doctor's office, we're going to be able to reduce the risk. There is a psychedelic that has been being utilized since 1960, is still being utilized today. It's not Schedule 1, it's ketamine assisted therapy. We hear about ketamine like everything else. If you allow ketamine to be prescribed at home and sent home and freely used, yeah, sure, it's going to get abused. But if you provide it in an office where it's clinically guided by a prescriber with a therapist, reducing the risk of abuse for that drug. So it's the one and only drug right now that we can use. There's really good data on it for major depression. There's really good data on it for PTSD. But there's a lot more drugs that are right behind it that are going to be FDA approved here within the next couple of years.
And that's what I wanted to ask on the very back end of that is, what is it going to take? I mean, do you envision there'll be congressional hearings, or does that not even matter? Does the FDA just make the decision themselves?
Yeah, the FDA makes the decision. So the way the medical route goes with psychedelics is just like every other drug. You're a drug manufacturer, you're a scientist, you make a drug, you show it works, you take it through the whole FDA process, and out the backside, they reschedule the drug and it becomes a drug that a doctor can prescribe in an office. And that's exactly how psychedelics are happening. At least in the medical sense, there is a whole non-medical use that is happening in Oregon and Colorado right now. And you don't have to have a medical diagnosis to go to these clinics. But that's outside the federal system. That's like state by state. I personally think that there's definitely some good to that, but I am solely focused on the federal medical model because I feel that's the way that we're going to be able to get it into the system the fastest, the right way, properly, what's the word I'm looking for? Regulated, and then properly administered with the right doctors that are going to administer it in a clinic type or an office type setting. And so right now, there's one drug, MDMA. People know it, the street name Molly. MDMA has been through phase 1, phase 2, It's the furthest along. It's finished 2 phase 3 trials with over 70% efficacy rates for reducing PTSD and its symptoms. Most of us think that MDMA assisted therapy will be FDA approved by the end of this year, or PTSD specifically.
And so if that, let's assume that happens, and if I'm a veteran and I have really bad PTSD issues, it could be as simple as if you had asthma, you go to the doctor diagnoses you, he prescribes it. It sounds like this would have to be taken not maybe at home, but in a controlled setting. But it would just be.
Yeah, there's going to be, David, like there's definitely some more operational pieces to it, but in a simple process is exactly what you said. It is going to be another medicine that if you're a doctor and you're an individual that has PTSD and you come to my office and I do a diagnosis and I think you have PTSD, I will be able to prescribe this to you under these certain parameters, right? You're going to have a therapist there. There's going to have to be there's a whole kind of process that goes along with psychedelics because they're not just like any other drug. You do go through an experience. So it's going to have to be done that way. But you are going to be able to have access to it. Like that's the idea, right? It's not, you don't have to go find it underground. It's not going to be illegal. This will be a legal 100% FDA approved pharmaceutical that you'll be able to take along with therapy. So that's the other thing is that all psychedelics right now that are coming to market will be paired with psychotherapy. So it's the drug and the therapy.
I think it's a great idea because we have a pill problem in America to begin with. We have an opioid problem. We've got half the country, young males, hopped up on, SSSIs. It just seems like there might have been a little overprescribing of pills in this country. And if this is going to be good for veterans and it gets people off of the pill farms, which we've all watched flood the market, I'm all for it. I don't know if I would have been 3 years ago because I didn't know anything about it, and I've tried to interview and learn more about it. And I don't know why anyone would be against it at this point. To me, it doesn't make sense to be, like you said, they're already on drugs, but the drugs aren't working. Wouldn't it make more sense to put them on something under controlled supervision that's actually going to work?
Yeah, we just need to provide better access to new treatments that are working. And so if there's something out there that is better than I call old technology, we might as well, we have to take a look at it. We shouldn't be blocking access to drugs right now that we're utilizing that are, kind of 30 and 40 years old that aren't working. And, many of these drugs get you off of, the opioids and some of the, a lot of these antidepressants, SSRIs, as you were talking about. And they're not for everybody. There is a, if you want to call it prior authorization, or meaning like you do have to qualify to get these prescriptions, but that's okay. That means that like we can't just give them out to everybody. Like you have to go through the process. You have to go. You have to be diagnosed. You may have to try other traditional treatments first and fail them before you try these. But the point is, you should have access to these if you need them. That's the bottom line, right? You should not be able to have access to them. So it's exciting time. There are definitely there's a lot of skepticism. I just think, like everything else, something that's new and innovative and potentially too good to be true, we just need to be careful. And I think we are being careful. There's some that are not. Those are bad actors, and like every other, bad actors will be found and they'll go away. But fighting 20 years of combat and coming back and not having modern tools to deal with it is just not. It's unsat, right? It's not what the American needs at this point, right? The American who's coming back from war needs to enjoy the rest of their 40 years of life with their family, with their kids, with their spouse, whatever. And so if we can give them that opportunity, let's try to at least figure out how to do that.